I was born an outcast, a wolfless omega not worth a copper coin,
I'm here
until a
now.
king looked upon me and saw not a curse, but a savior. The scent of despair clung to the stones of the auction block. It was the smell of lives sold for handfuls of silver, of futures traded away by those who had the power to decide who was valuable and who was not. Lyra stood with her head bowed, the coarse fabric of her shift scratching against her skin. The mountain wind swept through the open market square of Silvercrest, Montana, carrying whispers that cut deeper than the cold. Around her, other omegas shivered their fear, a tangible wave in the chilly air. They were the unwanted, the flawed, the packless cattle to be haggled over. For them, this was a final desperate chance. But Lyra was different even among the outcasts. She was a pariah. While others possessed the soft, yielding nature of their rank, they at least had a wolf slumbering within them. Lyra had only silence. She was wolfless. A hollow shell in a world defined by the spirit within. Her family, the once proud Silver Creek pack, had cast her out, their shame too great to bear the burden of a broken daughter. They had given her to the auctioneers without a backward glance, her price a pittance, to cover their travel expenses back to their territory in the northern mountains. Next, the auctioneer boomed, his voice echoing off the wooden structures of the market square. Lot 17, Lyra of the disgraced Silver Creek line. Wolfless Baron, but she has a pretty face. For those who value such things, let us start the bidding at a single copper. A cruel snicker rippled through the sparse crowd of low-ranking shifters and opportunistic merchants. A single copper. It was less than the price of a stale loaf of bread. No one raised a hand. Lyra closed her eyes, her shame a hot brand on her soul. She had expected this. Who would want a useless thing like her? Her only gift was a secret one, a thing she could not name or explain. It was a deep, quiet well of empathy within her, an ability to feel the pain of others and in some small way to soothe it. She could calm a spooked horse with a murmur, quiet, a crying infant with a touch. But in a society that revered physical prowess and the ferocity of the wolf, her gentle talent was seen as nothing more than a peasant trick. The auctioneer was about to dismiss her, to send her to the tanner's pits, where the truly worthless ended their days, when a new presence silenced the square. The wooden gates groaned open, and two figures in obsidian armor stepped inside. Their faces were grim, their armor emblazoned with the roaring wolf of Blackwood territory. Between them walked a man whose robes of office marked him as a member of high authority. He was tall and severe, his face a mask of aristocratic disdain. Lyra recognized him from the public decrees that were occasionally read in even the most remote villages. Lord Marcus, uncle to the king and acting regent of Blackwood territory. His gaze swept over the pathetic display of omegas on the block, his lip curling in disgust. By order of the regent, he announced, his voice slicing through the silence. A tribute is required. The king's affliction grows worse. The Shadow Blight deepens its hold. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Everyone knew of the Alpha King's curse. King Dominic the Black Wolf, a hero who had fallen in the witch wars only to be brought back by dark magic, was now a prisoner in his own body. A curse twisted his wolf, turning it into a monstrous, uncontrollable beast of shadow and rage. He was isolated in the highest tower of the Blackwood fortress. His howls of agony were a nightly reminder of their sovereign's torment. Lord Marcus continued, his eyes cold and empty. We have tried healers, sorcerers, and priestesses. All have failed. Now we try a different path. It is said the gentle nature of an omega can soothe even the wildest beast. Therefore, a tribute of soothing has been decreed. His gaze fell upon Lyra. It was a chilling, calculating look. She saw no pity in his eyes, only opportunity. Dozens of omegas had already been sent to the king's tower. None had returned. They were not tributes. They were sacrifices. You buy, Marcus said, pointing a single elegant finger at her, the wolfless one. You are worthless to all others. Perhaps your emptiness will serve the king. You will be this month's tribute. The auctioneer sputtered. My lord, she is defective. Surely a stronger omega. She is disposable, Marcus cut him off. If she fails, nothing of value is lost. If by some miracle she succeeds, well, miracles are for the desperate. He tossed a single gold coin onto the stage. It spun and landed at Lyra's feet, a stark contrast to the single copper that had been her starting price. Her price is paid. Prepare her. The guards moved forward, their gauntlets closing around her thin arms. Fear, cold and sharp, finally pierced through Lyra's numb resignation. She was being sent to die, to be torn apart by the monster who was once their king. As they dragged her from the block, she looked back at the crowd. No one met her eyes. To them, she was already dead. She was a forgotten Omega, a wolfless girl sent to soothe a cursed king whose soul had already been devoured by shadows. The Blackwood Fortress was a structure of jagged stone and perpetual shadow, a place that seemed to swallow the light. Nestled in the dense pine forests of northern Montana, it loomed over the surrounding wilderness like a predator surveying its domain. Lyra was escorted through cold, echoing halls where tapestries depicting the glorious victories of King Dominic hung like mocking ghosts. They showed a king with eyes like polished obsidian and a warrior's smile, not the tormented creature he had become. The guards' footsteps were the only sound, a rhythmic march toward her doom. They ascended a winding staircase that seemed to climb into the very heavens. The air grew colder, charged with a raw, oppressive energy that made the hairs on her arms stand up. It was an aura of pure, undiluted agony. Her own empathic senses screamed at her, a silent shriek of torment that was not her own. This was his pain. This was the Shadow Blight. The guards stopped before a massive iron-bound door. Heavy chains were draped across it, secured with locks that looked as if they could hold back a siege engine. One of the guards produced a key, his hand trembling slightly as he undid the locks. "His Majesty is unwell today," the guard mumbled, refusing to look at her. "Do not make any sudden movements. Do not speak unless spoken to. And by the goddess, do not touch him." He pushed the door open, and the wave of suffering that washed over Lyra nearly brought her to her knees. The room beyond was vast and opulent, but it was a cage of ruined splendor. Furniture was splintered and overturned. Deep claw marks, impossibly large, scarred the stone walls and floor. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the bitter scent of despair. And in the center of the room, he was there. King Dominic was a giant. Even kneeling, he was bound to the floor by thick silver chains that strained against his every ragged breath. His back was to her, his massive frame hunched in misery. His long black hair was matted with sweat and something darker. His skin, where she could see it, was pale and etched with writhing black veins that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. This was the curse. The Shadow Blight made manifest. He did not turn. His voice was a low growl, a rumble that vibrated through the stone floor. "Another one. Marcus grows more foolish with each passing moon. Leave little Omega. Run while you still can. There is no king here. Only a beast." Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, to obey the guard's advice in the king's own command. But her feet remained rooted to the spot. Beneath the crushing weight of his power and rage, her strange gift showed her something else. She could feel the sliver of the man still trapped inside the monster, a soul screaming in a prison of his own flesh. The pain was a physical thing, a shard of ice in her own heart. She took a hesitant step forward. The chains rattled as he shifted his head, slowly turning. She saw his profile first, a sharp, aristocratic jaw clenched in a permanent snarl, a brow furrowed in eternal torment. Then he faced her fully, and she forgot how to breathe. He was beautiful in a terrifying, broken way. His face was all harsh angles and savage grace, but his eyes were the heart of the storm. One was a deep, intelligent gray, the eye of a king. The other glowed with a malevolent crimson light, the eye of the beast. The shadow veins pulsed more violently on that side of his face, a creeping corruption that sought to claim him completely. "You are not afraid," he murmured, his voice laced with a dangerous curiosity. It was not a question. The others screamed, they wept, they begged. "You just stare." Lyra found her voice, though it was little more than a whisper. "Fear is a luxury, Your Majesty. I was sold for less than a loaf of bread. There is little left for me to be afraid of." A flicker of something surprised interest crossed his features. The red glow in his eye dimmed for a fraction of a second. "Wolfless," he stated, his gaze piercing. He could sense it on her, the blank space where her wolf should have been. "My uncle sends me a broken toy to play with." How fitting. The guards slammed the door shut behind her, the locks clicking into place with grim finality. She was trapped. Trapped with the monster. I am not a toy, she said, a spark of defiance igniting within her. She had nothing left to lose. I am Lyra. He let out a short, harsh laugh that sounded like grinding stone. You have a name. It will not save you. He strained against his chains, the muscles in his arms and back cording like steel cables. A low growl escaped his throat, and the shadowy tendrils under his skin writhed and darkened. The agony was intensifying. The blight is rising. Get to the far corner of the room. Press yourself against the wall. Do not move. Do not even breathe too loudly. If you are lucky, it will not notice you when it takes me. He threw his head back and roared. A sound of such profound agony that Lyra felt it crack her own bones. It was the sound of a soul being ripped apart. The beast was coming. She should have been terrified, but all she felt was an overwhelming, heartbreaking wave of compassion for the suffering king. Lyra did not retreat to the corner. She stood her ground, her body trembling, but her will a sudden, unshakable pillar of steel. She watched him fight, watched him suffer for her potential safety. He was a king even in chains, even as a monster. The shadowy veins on his body pulsed with a sickening rhythm, spreading like ink in water. His form began to distort muscles, swelling bones, cracking, and reshaping under the force of the malevolent magic. His screams became inhuman snarls. The beast was winning. Instead of hiding, Lyra took another step closer. "What are you doing, you little fool?" Dominic snarled, his voice distorting, deepening. He was on all fours now, the transformation almost complete. "I told you to hide." "You are still in there," she whispered, her voice barely audible over his pained growls. "I can feel you." Her own senses were on fire, the agony pouring off him, a physical assault. But through it, she felt the core of the man, the desperate clawing will to survive, to protect, to remain himself. It was a tiny flicker of light in an overwhelming darkness. She focused on it. Without thinking, she began to speak. She spoke of the sun on the fields of her old home, of the taste of wild berries picked in the summer, of the clear mountain streams in star-filled skies. She did not tell a grand story. She offered him small, simple pieces of a life he could no longer touch. Her voice was soft, a quiet thread in the cacophony of his torment. She did not know if he could even hear her, but she kept speaking, pouring her own desperate hope into the words. To her amazement, the beast's rampage seemed to falter. The violent thrashing against the chains lessened. Dominic, or what was left of him, lifted his monstrous head, his eyes now, both glowing a feral crimson, fixed on her. The snarl was still on his lips, but a sliver of confusion tempered the rage. "Why?" The beast's voice rumbled, a strange hybrid of Dominic's cadence and a guttural growl. "Why do you not run? Because no one should have to suffer alone?" Lyra answered, her gaze unwavering. For a long moment, the creature simply stared. The shadowy tendrils that made up its shifting form seemed to still listening. The oppressive aura of pain in the room lessened by a fraction. It was as if her words, her simple presence, were a balm on a festering wound. The change was minuscule, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Slowly, painfully, the transformation began to reverse. The shadows receded, bones snapping back into place with sickening crunches. Dominic collapsed onto the stone floor. His human form returned, though he was pale and shaking, drenched in a cold sweat. The chains hung loosely on him now. He lay there panting, his head turned toward her. The crimson glow was gone from his eye, leaving only the weary gray of the king. "How?" he rasped, his voice raw. "No one. Nothing has ever pushed it back before, not even for a moment." "I just talked," she said, her own knees feeling weak with relief. "It was more than that," he said, pushing himself up into a sitting position. He looked at her with a new intensity, a calculating intelligence that was far more intimidating than the beast's rage. "Who are you, wolfless girl?" Before she could answer, the heavy door creaked open. Lord Marcus stood on the threshold, flanked by his guards. He took in the scene, the exhausted king, the unbroken Omega, and a flicker of deep displeasure crossed his face before he masked it with a concerned frown. "Dominic, my dear nephew, are you well?" "We heard the roars. I feared the worst." His eyes slid to Lyra, cold and sharp. "And you are still alive. How unexpected." "She is under my protection, uncle," Dominic said, his voice regaining some of its regal strength. He did not try to stand, but his presence filled the room nonetheless. "She will remain here." Of course," Marcus said smoothly, though his eyes narrowed. Whatever brings you comfort. But a wolfless Omega, it is an embarrassment. The court whispers. They say you are so far gone you cling to a broken creature for solace. Let them whisper, Dominic replied, his gaze locked with his uncle's. Their words are wind. She stays. Marcus gave a tight, thin-lipped smile. As you wish, your majesty. He turned to Lyra. Be that you continue to be useful. The king's favor is a fickle thing. With a final, lingering look that was both a warning and a threat, he swept from the room, the door closing behind him. The sound of the locks being fastened echoed once more, sealing Lyra with the king. She was no longer just a sacrifice. She was a curiosity, a potential solution. And to a man like Lord Marcus, that made her something far more dangerous a problem to be eliminated. In the days that followed, Lyra was given simple servants' quarters adjoining Dominic's main chamber, a small mercy that allowed her a sliver of privacy. Food was brought by silent guards who refused to meet her eyes. She was a ghost in the fortress, her existence known only to a few. Her purpose, however, became clearer with each passing day. She was an anchor for the king. When the tremors of the curse began, when the shadow veins darkened on his skin, she would speak to him. She would sit just out of his reach and fill the oppressive silence with stories. She told him of market days, of the changing seasons, of the mythology of the goddess and the great wolf. She spun tales from memory and imagination, weaving tapestries of words to distract him from his own inner war. And it worked. The full transformations became less frequent. The periods of lucidity, of calm, grew longer. Dominic began to speak back. At first, his questions were curt, impersonal. He asked about the state of the territory, the harvest, the morale of the people. He was a king, starved for his duties. Lyra answered what she could, piecing together gossip and news she had overheard in her previous life. Then his questions became more personal. Why did your family cast you out? He asked one evening. He was sitting on the edge of his stone dais, the chains still pulled around his ankles. He had refused to let the guards remove them completely, a grim reminder of the beast that still slept within. Lyra hesitated, the old shame stinging her. I am wolfless, she said simply. To them I was a blight on our bloodline, a failure. Failure is being unable to protect your people. Dominic countered, his voice low. Failure is being chained to a rock, while your kingdom withers under the hand of a man like my uncle. Your condition is a circumstance of birth, not a measure of your worth. His words were a revelation. No one had ever spoken of her condition with anything other than pity or disgust. To have the Alpha King, a man revered for his strength, dismiss the very thing that had defined her as worthless, it shifted something fundamental inside her. She found her courage. Why do you let him rule in your stead, Lord Marcus? He does not have the people's best interests at heart. A dark look crossed Dominic's face. Marcus is ambitious and cruel, but he holds the council. While I am like this, he gestured to his chains to the shadow-stained skin. My claim is fragile. Many believe I am no longer fit to rule. They would see me put down like a rabid dog. Marcus maintains order, even if it is a cold and oppressive one. He is the devil I know. He sent me here to die, Lyra stated quietly. I know, Dominic said, his gray eye meeting hers, and for that he will answer to me when I am free. The promise in his voice was absolute. In that moment, he was not a monster. He was her king, and a strange tentative bond was forming between them, spun from shared solitude and whispered secrets in the dark. He began to see past the wolfless Omega and saw Lyra a woman of quiet strength and surprising resilience. And she in turn saw past the cursed beast to the noble tormented man trapped within. It was during the second week of her stay that Lyra met him, the old beta, who moved through the fortress like a wraith, appearing in doorways without sound, his eyes knowing and ancient. Thaddeus Elias, former royal advisor, now relegated to the shadows by Lord Marcus's rise to power. His hair was silver, his face lined with the wisdom of 9 decades, but his posture remained straight, his mind sharp as a blade. He found her one morning as she was returning to her chamber with fresh linens. So you are the one, he said, his voice like dry parchment rustling. The wolfless girl who tames the pseudo beast. Lyra tensed, unsure if he was friend or foe. I do not tame anything, sir. I merely speak with the king. A smile creased his weathered face. Words have power, child, more than fang and claw sometimes. He glanced around, then lowered his voice. I have known others like you. Rare. special. Perhaps that is why Marcus chose you, though, not for the reason he claims. Her heart quickened. Others like me wolfless. Not wolfless, he said, shaking his head. Different. You do not lack a wolf, young Lyra. You simply have not found it yet. Before she could question him further, he pressed a small, worn book into her hands. Read this. When the guards sleep. It speaks of the curse and how it might be broken. A true king needs his freedom. He slipped away as silently as he had appeared, leaving Lyra with the book clutched to her chest and 1,000 questions burning in her mind. That night, by the light of a single candle, she opened the ancient tome. The pages were brittle, the ink faded, but the words sent a chill down her spine. The Shadow Blight was not just a curse. It was a prison designed to hold Dominic's soul while slowly draining his power. And according to the text, it could only be broken by an act of true belonging when the cursed soul found its anchor, its home, its true place in the world. How could a chained king find belonging? How could a wolfless Omega help him? As the weeks passed, Lyra's bond with Dominic deepened. She learned of his childhood, of the pressures of ruling, of the witch wars that had claimed his life before dark magic brought him back. He told her of waking to find himself both savior and monster, of the slow realization that the magic that resurrected him had also cursed him. The witch queen of the Crystal Peak, he explained one night, his voice low and haunted. Lilith, as I died on her blade, she whispered the curse. When the warlocks resurrected me, it came with me. She said it would feed on shadow, on pain, on isolation. That it would grow stronger the more I was cut off from my pack, from my kingdom, from myself. Lyra sat in silence, absorbing his words, feeling the weight of his isolation. She told me it could only be broken by an act of true belonging. He continued, his eyes distant. To find a place, a person where my soul felt truly anchored. How could I find that, chained in a tower feared by everyone as a monster? His gaze met hers, the vulnerability in it stark and raw. I thought it was impossible, a cruel joke to ensure my eternal torment. But when you speak to me, when you look at me and are not afraid for a moment, I feel something, a connection, an anchor. It feels like belonging. The air between them crackled with unspoken emotion. The protector and the protected, the king and the outcast. Their roles had blurred and inverted until they were simply a man and a woman bound by a shared desperate fight for survival. I will not leave you, she said, her voice filled with a fierce conviction that belied her Omega status. We will fight this together. It was a vow, a promise made in the heart of the fortress's highest tower. But even as the words were spoken, an external threat was already in motion. Far below in the council chambers, Lord Marcus was putting the final pieces of his own plan into place. He had seen Lyra's effect on the king through the scrying mirrors he used to monitor the tower. He had seen the beast calm the curse recede. The Omega was not a problem anymore. She was a genuine threat to his ascension. And beside him, her pale beauty, as cold and deadly as winter frost, stood Lilith, the witch queen who had cursed Dominic. Her eyes gleamed with anticipation as Marcus outlined the next phase of their long game. The harvest moon approaches, Lilith said, her voice like honey laced with poison. 3 nights from now, the power of the Shadow Blight will peak. If he transforms, then completely the last of his humanity will be burned away. His power will be ripe for the taking. Marcus nodded, his face a mask of calculated ambition. And the girl, the Omega, without a wolf. Lilith's smile was a cruel slash across her perfect features. She is the final key. The Shadow Blight feeds on isolation, on being cut off from one's true nature. She has spent her life isolated, cut off from what she truly is. Their resonance is why she can reach him. And on the night of the harvest moon, her blood will open the lock that binds his power. Then she dies. Marcus stated not a question but a declaration. Oh yes, Lilith purred. They both do. And the power of the Black Wolf becomes yours, as we agreed. What neither of them knew, what they could not possibly have suspected, was that old Elias was listening from the shadows, his aged heart heavy with the weight of what he had just heard. He had guided 3 generations of Blackwood kings. He would not fail this one. The old man moved silently through the fortress, making his way to the tower. He had to warn Lyra. He had to prepare her for what was to come, because he knew what she was, even if she did not. He had recognized it the moment he saw her, the emptiness that was not emptiness, The absence that was really a presence waiting to be awakened. She was a Heartwood Spirit, the rarest of all wolf souls. Not absent, but dormant. Not broken, but biding its time. The perfect counterbalance to the Shadow Blight. If he could reach her in time, if he could teach her what she needed to know before the harvest moon, there might still be hope for Dominic. There might still be hope for them all. But as Elias climbed the winding stairs, his old legs protesting with each step, he sensed he was not alone. The shadows moved against the wall, not cast by the torchlight, but by something else, something hunting. Marcus had sent his shadows to silence the old advisor. Elias quickened his pace, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had to reach Lyra. He had to reach the king before the shadows consumed them all. The fortress slept, but old Elias did not. The shadows pursued him through winding corridors, up spiraling staircases, and across abandoned halls. His breathing came in short, ragged gasps, the weight of his 90 years bearing down on his shoulders with every step. Still, he pressed on one hand, clutched to his side where a stitch of pain blossomed, the other gripping a leather-bound journal, the last hope for the king and the wolfless girl. When he finally reached the tower door, his gnarled fingers trembled as they fumbled with the servant's key he had kept hidden for decades. The lock turned with a reluctant click, and he slipped inside, securing the door behind him. The king's chambers were quiet. Dominic slept a rare moment of peace on his troubled features. In the adjoining room, Lyra sat by a small window, staring at the waxing moon that hung heavy in the night sky. "Child," Elias whispered, his voice urgent but soft, "we have little time." Lyra turned, startled by his sudden appearance. "Master Elias, how did you—" "Listen carefully," he interrupted, moving to her side with surprising speed for one so ancient. "The harvest moon rises in 3 nights. When it does, Lord Marcus and the witch Lilith will attempt to complete what they began years ago." Confusion crossed Lyra's face. "The witch who cursed the king, she is here," Elias nodded grimly. "She has been here all along, disguised as Marcus's foreign advisor. They plan to use you, child, your blood, your connection to the king. On the night of the harvest moon, the Shadow Blight will reach its peak. If Dominic transforms completely, the last remnant of his humanity will be consumed." "And then what?" Lyra asked, though the dread in her eyes suggested she already knew. "Then Marcus will claim the power of the Black Wolf for himself. He will become what Dominic should have been, the most powerful alpha in 1,000 years. And you, my dear, will be the sacrifice that makes it possible." Lyra's hands clenched into fists. "I won't let that happen. I will warn Dominic. We will fight." Elias shook his head, silver hair catching the moonlight. "Fighting is what they expect. What they want. The king's rage feeds the blight. No, child. You must do something else entirely." He pressed the journal into her hands. "You must become what you truly are." The leather was worn smooth by decades of handling. When Lyra opened it, the pages revealed meticulous notes and sketches of wolves unlike any she had seen. They glowed with inner light, their eyes pools of ancient wisdom. "What is this?" she whispered. "The record of my life's work," Elias said. "I have served 3 generations of Blackwood kings. I have studied the old magic, the true nature of our kind. What you hold is knowledge that Lilith would kill to possess. It tells of the Heartwood Spirits." "Heartwood Spirits, the rarest of all wolf souls?" Elias explained, his voice gaining strength as he spoke of his passion. "Not hunters or warriors, but healers, protectors of balance. They appear once in a century, if at all. Always hidden, always disguised as something broken or flawed." Understanding dawned on Lyra's face. "You think I know," Elias said firmly. "I have seen 5 in my long life. The first was my grandmother. The last was you. You are not wolfless Lyra of Silver Creek. Your wolf slumbers, waiting for the moment it is truly needed, waiting for its perfect match." Lyra looked toward the sleeping king, realization washing over her like a wave. Dominic. The Shadow Blight and the Heartwood Spirit are ancient opposites. Darkness and light. Destruction and healing. Apart, they are powerful. Together, his voice trailed off, awe and fear mingling in his eyes. Together, they are transformation itself. Elias moved to the window, peering out at the moon with a worried expression. "I cannot stay. Marcus's shadows hunt me even now. Study the journal. Learn what you are. In 3 nights when the harvest moon rises, you must be ready. He placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. The king sees something in you that others missed. Trust that. Trust yourself. But how will I know what to do? Lyra asked, desperation edging her voice. What if I fail? Elias smiled, a gentle expression that erased decades from his ancient face. My father told me something before he died. He said the wisest action often looks like doing nothing at all. When the moment comes, you will know. He moved to the door, then paused, turning back one final time. Remember, child, the strongest wolf is not the one with the sharpest fangs, but the one with the strongest heart. With that, he slipped away, a ghost in the night, leaving Lyra alone with a sleeping king and a book of impossible truths. The next morning, Dominic found Lyra changed. There was a new certainty in her movements, a quiet purpose behind her eyes that had not been there before. She brought his breakfast, herself dismissing the usual guard. You look different today, he observed, watching her set the tray beside him. Like you've seen something. Perhaps I have, she replied, sitting across from him. The chains around his ankles clinked softly as he shifted to face her. Tell me about the witch, Lilith. Dominic's expression darkened. Why do you ask about her? Because she is here, Lyra said simply, in the fortress, with your uncle. The king went very still. Even the shadow veins beneath his skin seemed to pause their constant writhing. How do you know this? Elias told me. Last night. She studied his face. You're not surprised. No, Dominic admitted, his voice low. I suspected. Marcus was never clever enough to orchestrate all of this alone. The pieces never quite fit. His gray eye met hers, sharp with intelligence. What else did the old man tell you? That I am not what I appear to be. That in 3 nights when the harvest moon rises, Marcus and Lilith will attempt to complete what they started. That you will be consumed by the blight, and I will be sacrificed to fuel their ritual. Dominic's hand curled into a fist, knuckles, white with tension. I will kill them before they touch you. No, Lyra said firmly, placing her hand over his. It was the first time she had touched him voluntarily, and the contact sent a jolt through them both. That is exactly what they want. Your rage feeds the blight. We need a different approach. She hesitated, then added, Elias believes I may be a Heartwood Spirit. The king's expression shifted from anger to astonishment. A Heartwood, they are legend myths told to pups on winter nights. So are shadow-cursed kings, Lyra countered. Yet here you are. A reluctant smile tugged at Dominic's lips. Here I am indeed. He studied her with new eyes, seeing past the ordinary facade to something luminous beneath. It would explain much. How you calmed the beast. How you reached me when no one else could. Elias gave me his journal. He has studied the old magic for decades. If there is a way to break your curse to stop Marcus and Lilith, it may be in those pages. Dominic nodded slowly. Elias has served my family since my grandfather's time. If anyone knows the truth of this curse, it would be him. His hand turned beneath hers, their fingers intertwining. What do we do now? Now, Lyra said, we prepare, and we wait. For the next 2 days, Lyra immersed herself in Elias's journal. The old beta's cramped handwriting filled page after page with observations, theories, and ancient lore about the true nature of wolves. She learned that Heartwood spirits were more than mere healers. They were balancers, bridges between worlds. Their power lay not in dominance but in harmony, not in conquest but in connection. Most crucially, she learned why she had never shifted, never felt her wolf. The Heartwood did not awaken until it found its counterpart, its perfect opposite. For Lyra, that opposite was the Shadow Blight that consumed Dominic. Her wolf had been waiting all her life for this moment, for this king. As the knowledge sank in, Lyra felt something stirring deep within her. A presence warm and patient that had always been there but never acknowledged. Her wolf awakening from its long slumber. Meanwhile, Dominic's condition worsened. The approach of the harvest moon strengthened the blight. The shadow veins spread further across his skin, and his transformations became more frequent, more violent. Lyra stayed with him through each episode, speaking softly, reminding him of who he was. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes the beast raged for hours before receding. On the morning of the 3rd day, with the harvest moon looming that night, Lord Marcus made his appearance in the tower. He strode in with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, guards flanking him on either side. How fares our king today? he asked, false concern dripping from his voice. Dominic, seated by the window, turned to face his uncle. The shadow veins now covered half his face, and the crimson glow in his right eye burned constantly. Better than you might hope, uncle. Marcus smiled thinly. I hope only for your recovery, nephew. His gaze shifted to Lyra, who stood nearby. The Omega has been of service, I see. How unusual. Her name is Lyra, Dominic growled, a hint of the beast in his voice. Yes, yes, of course. Marcus waved dismissively. I've brought a gift, a draft of fortified wine from the southern vineyards, to celebrate your continued survival. One of the guards stepped forward, placing an ornate goblet on a small table. The liquid within was dark as blood, with a strange iridescent sheen. You will excuse me if I don't partake, Dominic said coldly. My appetite has been unpredictable of late. Marcus's smile tightened. As you wish, perhaps later. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, I nearly forgot. There has been an incident. The old advisor, Elias. He was found this morning in the eastern courtyard. Quite dead, I'm afraid. Fell from the battlements in the night. A tragedy at his advanced age. Lyra's heart clenched, but she kept her face carefully neutral. Dominic, however, surged to his feet, chains rattling. Elias would never be so careless, he snarled. He knew those battlements better than any man alive. Grief clouds your judgment, nephew, Marcus said smoothly. The guards witnessed his fall, an accident, nothing more. Now I must attend to the council. The Harvest Moon Festival requires preparation. As Marcus departed, his final glance at Lyra carried a cold promise. The moment he was gone, she moved to the goblet, lifting it carefully to her nose. Poison, Dominic asked. Worse, Lyra replied, setting it down as if it might bite. Magic, I can feel it. This is meant to trigger your transformation tonight when the moon is at its peak. Dominic's jaw clenched. Elias was no accident. Marcus silenced him. He tried, Lyra said, pulling the journal from its hiding place beneath a loose floorboard. But Elias's voice remains here, and he has given us the weapon we need. As evening approached, the atmosphere in the fortress changed. Servants hurried through the halls with furtive glances. Guards doubled at every post. The air hummed with anticipation and dread. In the tower, Lyra helped Dominic prepare for what was to come. According to Elias's journal, the harvest moon would push the Shadow Blight to its apex. The transformation would be more complete, more devastating than any before. If they were to break the curse, it would have to be at the moment of greatest darkness. If I lose control completely, Dominic said, securing the reinforced chains to the stone anchors in the floor, you must leave. Promise me. Lyra knelt before him, taking his face in her hands. The shadow veins pulsed beneath her fingers, but she did not flinch. I will not leave you. Not now, not ever. His eyes, one gray, one crimson, searched hers. Why risk everything for a monster you barely know? Because I see you, she said simply. Not the king, not the beast, you. The moment hung between them, fragile and precious. Then, without thought or plan, Dominic leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, almost reverent, a stark contrast to the violence that lurked beneath his skin. When he pulled away, there were tears in his eyes. If we survive this night, he whispered, I will spend a lifetime showing you that your faith was not misplaced. Before Lyra could respond, a commotion erupted from the lower levels of the fortress, shouting the clash of steel, the unmistakable sounds of combat. It's begun, Dominic said, tensing as the shadow veins darkened. Marcus is making his move. The door burst open and a guard staggered in, blood streaming from a wound in his side. My king, he gasped. An attack. Rebels in the dungeons. They freed the prisoners. Dominic's head snapped up, his kingly instincts overriding everything else. It's a diversion. Marcus is dividing my loyal guards. Even as he spoke, a tremor ran through him. He looked down at his hand, then at Lyra, horror dawning in his eyes. He's already done it, he whispered. The wine, I never drank it, but... Lyra saw it then, a thin, almost invisible puncture on Dominic's forearm. A needle coated in the same dark substance had been hidden in the goblet's ornate stem. It had pricked him when Marcus presented the cup. No, she breathed, rushing to his side as he fell to his knees. Fight it, Dominic. Fight it with everything you have. But it was too late. The poison hit him like a physical blow, instantaneous and brutal. The wolf's bane attacked his shifter physiology while the magical accelerant ignited the dormant curse. The shadow veins erupted across his skin, blacker and more virulent than ever. Dominic roared a sound of pure, unadulterated agony and collapsed to the floor. This was not a transformation. This was a war inside his body, the poison and the curse tearing him apart from the inside out. At that exact moment, Lord Marcus himself appeared in the doorway, flanked by a dozen of his personal guards. Beside him stood a woman of otherworldly beauty, her platinum hair cascading down her back, her eyes glowing with an unnatural violet light. Lilith, the witch queen who had cursed the king. "Behold," Marcus cried, his voice ringing with false horror for the benefit of any onlookers. "The king has finally succumbed. The beast is unleashed." He pointed a dramatic finger at Lyra. "And look, the Omega Witch has poisoned him to seize control. There is the goblet shattered on the floor. Arrest her. Put the monster out of its misery." His guards advanced, spears leveled. They were creating a circle, trapping Lyra with the raging, mindless beast that Dominic was becoming. Marcus's plan was perfect. The beast would kill Lyra, and his guards would kill the beast. He would be seen as the savior of the fortress, the reluctant hero forced to put down his mad nephew. Lilith's eyes gleamed with cruel anticipation. The Shadow Blight feeds on his rage, his pain. Soon it will consume the last of his humanity, and the power will be ripe for harvesting. The Shadow Beast erupted from Dominic, not as a controlled change, but as an explosion of dark energy. It was a mindless, rabid thing driven by the poison's fire and the curse's amplified rage. Its only instinct was to destroy. Lyra stood her ground as the massive creature rose before her, all shadow and teeth in mindless fury. There was nowhere to run. The guards formed a wall of spears behind her, their faces grim and resolved. In front of her was the monster Dominic had become, a creature beyond reason, beyond her reach. She closed her eyes, bracing for the impact, for the tearing of claws and the end of everything. But it never came. Instead, she heard a sickening crunch and a human grunt of pain. Her eyes flew open. Dominic was standing between her and the beast. It was impossible. The beast was a physical manifestation of the curse. It should not have been separate from him. Yet here he was in his human form, though he looked like a wraith, translucent, shimmering like a heat haze, his form barely holding together. He had somehow torn his spirit free from the rampaging monster, a feat of will that was actively killing him. His translucent hand was pressed against the beast's chest, holding it back. The monster snarled and swiped its shadowy claws, passing right through his ghostly form. Yet he held it at bay. "I will not let you hurt her." His spirit voice echoed in the room, faint and strained. It was his ultimate choice. With his body being destroyed by poison and his wolf turned into a mindless engine of destruction, he had used the last of his free will, the very essence of his soul, to shield her. Protecting the forgotten Omega was more important than his own survival, more important than his life, his crown, his very soul. This was his act of true belonging. Marcus stared, his jaw agape in disbelief. What sorcery is this? Kill them both. But as the guards hesitated, awestruck by the impossible sight, Lyra understood. He had chosen her. He had anchored his soul to her. And in that moment, something inside her, something that had been dormant and silent her entire life, answered his call. A warmth spread from her chest, a feeling like the first sun of spring after a long, hard winter. It was a power she never knew she possessed, the full, untapped force of her Heartwood Spirit awakened by his sacrifice. But before she could embrace this new strength, a new voice called from the back of the room, weak but determined. "Lyra, child, listen to me." She turned in shock to see Elias, bloodied and bruised but very much alive, being dragged into the tower by two of Marcus's men. The old beta had survived the fall, or more likely had never fallen at all. "The Heartwood Spirit is more than a healer," he called, his voice carrying despite his injuries. "It is a protector. Your wolf has always been there, waiting for this moment." Marcus signaled to one of his guards, who struck Elias across the face. "Silence, old man." Lilith stepped forward, her beautiful face contorted with rage. "Kill him, before he tells her." But Elias would not be silenced. Blood streaming from his split lip, he locked eyes with Lyra. "Your wolf does not come with rage or dominance," he gasped. "It comes with love, with sacrifice, with the wisdom to see what others cannot." Marcus strode to the old man and grabbed him by the throat. I should have killed you years ago, you interfering fool. Yes. Elias wheezed, a defiant smile on his battered face. You should have. But you always underestimated the power of age, of wisdom. His eyes found Lyra once more. Not all wolves howl, child. Some simply know. With a snarl of frustration, Marcus drew a dagger and plunged it into Elias's chest. The old man's eyes widened in pain and surprise. Then with his final breath, he whispered words only Lyra could hear. Trust your heart. It knows the way. As Elias slumped to the floor, his eyes fixed and unseeing, a terrible calm descended on Lyra. The kind of calm that comes from absolute clarity, from knowing exactly what must be done. She turned to face the shadow beast, which still struggled against Dominic's spectral form. She saw now what she had missed before the beast was not separate from Dominic. It was a manifestation of his pain, his rage, his fear. And the ghostly king, holding it back, was not just his soul, but his love, his hope, his will to protect. They were two halves of the same whole, torn apart by magic and malice. In that moment, she understood what the Heartwood Spirit truly was. Not just a healer, but a bridge, a connector of broken things, a mender of what had been sundered. Love, fierce and absolute, flooded through her. She did not run from the beast. She ran to Dominic's shimmering, fading spirit. No, she cried, her voice ringing with a newfound power. You will not die. She threw her arms around his ghostly form, and as she did, she pushed past him, past the barrier of his spirit, and came face to face with the monster. It roared in her face, its breath a vortex of cold despair. She did not hesitate. She rose on her toes, reached up, and pressed her lips to the place where the beast's mouth would be. She kissed the monster. It was not a soft, romantic gesture. It was an act of war. She poured all of herself into that kiss. Her love, her hope, her defiance, her soul's own light. It was a direct assault on the curse itself. Her pure, untainted empathy, the very essence of her soft power, met the ancient, hateful magic of the Shadow Blight head on. For a second, there was only silence. Then light exploded from their point of contact. A brilliant, blinding golden light that threw everyone in the room back. It was not a fire that burned, but a light that healed, that purified. The shadow beast shrieked a sound of dissolving hate. The light consumed it, broke it apart, and burned it into nothingness. The light coalesced, flowing back into Dominic's spirit form, and then into his physical body, which lay crumpled on the floor. It sealed the wound of the curse, purged the wolf's bane from his veins, and rekindled the dying embers of his life force. As the light faded, leaving the room in a stunned, ringing silence, Dominic lay on the floor, no longer poisoned, no longer cursed. The shadow veins were gone. He was simply himself. As he took a deep, shuddering breath, a new light began to glow around him and Lyra. It was a soft, golden aura, a visible manifestation of a bond snapping into place, ancient and unbreakable. The mating bond. On Lyra's neck, just below her ear, a mark began to form. Not a bite, but an elegant swirl of golden light that settled into her skin like a tattoo. The mark of the Luna Queen. And within her, the final transformation occurred. Her wolf, dormant for so long, rose to the surface. Not with violence or pain, but with a gentle, inevitable certainty. She felt it unfurl in her chest, a presence both familiar and new. Its coat was silver, its eyes a warm amber gold, and its spirit was ancient, wise, patient. A Heartwood Spirit. The rarest of all wolves, born not to hunt or dominate, but to heal, to protect, to connect. As this revelation washed over her, Lyra became aware of movement across the room. Lord Marcus was scrambling to his feet, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. This is impossible, he spat. The Shadow Blight cannot be broken. Lilith stood beside him, her beautiful face contorted with rage. What have you done, you little nothing? What have you done? Before either of them could move, Dominic's eyes snapped open. They were clear now, both the same deep, intelligent gray. The king was whole again. He rose to his feet with fluid grace, his presence filling the room with an authority that had nothing to do with the curse and everything to do with the man himself. Uncle, he said, his voice steady and cold as winter steel, you have committed treason against your king and your blood. You have conspired with the enemy of our people. You have murdered a loyal servant of the crown. Marcus's face drained of color. Nephew, you don't understand. Everything I did was for the good of Blackwood. You were lost to us, consumed by the curse. I only sought to—" "Enough," Dominic cut him off. "Your ambition has always outweighed your loyalty. And now it has led you to this end." Lilith stepped forward, her hands glowing with violet energy. "This isn't over," she hissed. "The Shadow Blight was only one of my creations. I have powers you cannot imagine." She thrust her hands forward, sending a blast of dark magic toward Dominic and Lyra. But before it could reach them, Lyra stepped in front, her eyes glowing with the golden light of her awakened wolf. The magic struck an invisible barrier and dissipated like smoke. Lilith's eyes widened in shock. "What are you?" "Something you forgot existed." Lyra replied, her voice resonant with new confidence. "A balance to your darkness, a light for his shadow." The witch screamed in rage and unleashed another, more powerful blast. This time, Lyra did not just block it. She absorbed it, her Heartwood Spirit transforming the dark energy into golden light that spread throughout the room, illuminating every corner, banishing every shadow. When the light receded, Lilith was on her knees, her power drained. Her beautiful face suddenly aged, lined with the centuries she had cheated through dark magic. "Impossible," she whispered, staring at her withered hands. "The Heartwood spirits were extinct. I hunted them myself centuries ago." "You missed one," Dominic said, moving to stand beside Lyra. "And now she hasn't undone all your work." The royal guards, those loyal to the crown rather than to Marcus, finally broke through the blockade in the lower levels and stormed the tower room. They found a scene of utter confusion. Marcus's personal guards, looking stunned, a withered crone where the beautiful foreign advisor had stood Lord Marcus, pale with fury, and in the center of it all, their king alive and whole, the curse visibly lifted from him. Beside Dominic stood the Omega tribute, a glowing golden mark adorning her neck, her eyes shining with inner light. "Seize them!" Dominic commanded, his voice ringing with the absolute authority of the Alpha King. He pointed a single steady finger at his uncle and the witch. "Lord Marcus and Lilith of the Crystal Peaks are traitors to the crown. They attempted to murder their king and usurp the throne." Marcus's personal guards, mercenaries bought with coin, looked from the powerless regent to the radiant, undeniably powerful king. Their loyalty evaporated in an instant. They dropped their weapons. The royal guards swarmed forward, clapping Marcus and Lilith in irons before either could utter a word of protest. Their reign of cold ambition was over. Dominic paid the chaos no mind. He had eyes only for Lyra and for the still form of Elias on the floor. He crossed the room and knelt beside the old beta, gently closing his unseeing eyes. "You were faithful to the end, old friend," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Your wisdom saved us all." He rose and turned to Lyra, crossing the room in 2 long strides. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, reverent. "You saved me," he murmured, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "You saved us all." "You saved me first," she whispered back, her heart feeling too large for her chest. The golden bond between them pulsed with warmth, a constant, comforting presence. It was a connection that went deeper than words, a perfect understanding that flowed between their souls. The transformation that had begun within her completed itself. The Heartwood Spirit, fully awakened, settled into her being as if it had always been there, which of course it had. It was not the savage, demanding presence of an alpha or beta wolf. It was something different, a gentle, steady warmth like the roots of an ancient tree awakening from a long slumber. Her wolf was not gone. It had been waiting. Waiting for him. Waiting for her to become whole. Dominic felt it through their new bond. His eyes widened. "Your wolf?" She nodded, a slow, wondrous smile spreading across her face. She was no longer broken. She was complete. And so was he. The Shadow Blight was gone, its darkness transformed into light by the power of the Heartwood Spirit and by the act of true belonging, his choice to protect her at the cost of his own life. As the guards led Marcus and Lilith away, Dominic turned to his men. "Take the body of Thaddeus Elias to the Hall of Heroes. He will lie in state for 7 days. So will know his sacrifice and his wisdom." The captain of the guard nodded, then hesitated. "And the Omega, my king?" Dominic's arms circled Lyra's waist, drawing her close. The golden bond between them was visible to all with eyes to see. "This is Lyra of Silver Creek, my mate and your queen. Address her with the respect she deserves." The captain's eyes widened, then he bowed deeply. "My apologies, Your Majesty. Long live the Queen. As the guards withdrew, carrying Elias's body with solemn reverence, Dominic and Lyra stood alone in the tower room. The chains that had bound him lay broken on the floor. The goblet that had held the poisoned wine was shattered. The moon, now risen to its apex, shone through the window, its harvest gold light bathing them in warmth. "What happens now?" Lyra asked, her voice small but steady. Dominic took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Now we rebuild. We heal the wounds that Marcus and Lilith inflicted on our people. We create a world where no one is cast aside for being different, where wisdom is valued as highly as strength." His gaze fell on the spot where Elias had fallen. "We honor those who saw what others could not, and we create a legacy worthy of their sacrifice." Lyra leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I am not trained to be a queen, and I was not prepared to be a monster," he countered gently. "Yet here we are both transformed. Your heart saw me when others saw only the beast. That wisdom, that sight is what our people need most." He tilted her face up to his. "The Heartwood Spirit does not lead through dominance or fear. It leads through connection, through understanding. Just as you reached me in my darkness, you will reach our people in their need." The golden bond between them pulsed a rhythm like a shared heartbeat. Through it, Lyra felt not just Dominic's love, but his absolute certainty in her. His faith was a tangible thing, as real and solid as the fortress walls around them. "I will try," she promised both to him and to herself. "For you, for Elias, for all those who have been forgotten or cast aside." Dominic smiled, the expression transforming his severe features, making him look younger, unburdened. "That is why the Heartwood chose you, my love. That is why I chose you. Not because you are perfect, but because you see the imperfection in others and love them anyway." As the harvest moon reached its zenith, casting its golden light across the fortress and the wilderness beyond, the king and his unlikely queen stood together, bound by something stronger than curse or crown or ancient magic. They were bound by choice, by sacrifice, by the rarest magic of all, the choice to see each other truly and to belong to one another completely. In the room where a monster had raged, where an old man had died for his king, where a wolfless girl had found her true power, a new chapter began. Not just for them, but for all of Blackwood territory. The reign of the Shadow Blight was over, and the dawn of the Heartwood Queen had begun. Dawn broke over Blackwood territory, painting the mountains with strokes of amber and gold. For the first time in years, King Dominic stood on the high balcony of the fortress, without chains, without pain, watching the sun climb over his lands. The Shadow Blight that had tormented him for so long was gone, its darkness transformed into light by the power of the Heartwood Spirit and by the act of true belonging. Beside him stood Lyra, her silver hair catching the morning light. She was changed as he was changed. The awakening of her wolf had given her a quiet confidence, a centered strength that radiated from her like warmth from a hearth. The mark of the Luna Queen glowed faintly on her neck, a swirl of golden light that marked her as his true mate. "What are you thinking?" she asked, her voice soft in the morning stillness. Dominic's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "I am thinking of Elias, of all he sacrificed, of all he knew." The old beta's body lay in state in the Hall of Heroes, surrounded by burning candles and draped in the royal colors. His aged face was peaceful in death, the lines of worry and pain smoothed away. He had died as he had lived, serving his king, protecting his people, passing on the wisdom of generations. "He knew about me," Lyra said. "He saw what no one else could see." "That was his gift," Dominic replied, "to see beneath the surface to the heart of things. My grandfather used to say that Elias could look at a forest and tell you which tree held the sweetest fruit, which branch would make the strongest bow, which roots went deepest into the earth. He saw patterns, connections." "He saw us," Lyra whispered, "before we saw ourselves." Dominic nodded, his expression solemn. "And now we must honor his sacrifice. We must rebuild what Marcus and Lilith tried to destroy." The damage was extensive. During his years as regent, Marcus had hollowed out the kingdom, replacing loyal servants with his own cronies, hoarding wealth that should have gone to the people, and sowing distrust between the different packs that made up the territory. The Shadow Blight had been both literal and metaphorical, a darkness spreading through the land, corrupting from within. But with the curse broken and the truth revealed, hope was returning. News of the king's healing spread rapidly. Shifters who had hidden away during Marcus's reign began to emerge. The fortress, once a place of shadow and whispers, now bustled with activity as Dominic reclaimed his throne and began the work of restoration. For Lyra, it was a time of discovery and adjustment. The wolfless Omega, who had been sold for a copper coin, was now Luna Queen Mate to the most powerful alpha in the territory. Her Heartwood Spirit, dormant for so long, now flourished within her, giving her insights and abilities she was only beginning to understand. Most remarkable was her healing touch. It had begun with small things, soothing a child's fever, easing an old guard's arthritic pain. But as her confidence grew, so did her power. The golden light that had broken Dominic's curse now flowed through her hands, mending wounds of body and spirit alike. Word spread quickly. People came to the fortress seeking the touch of the Heartwood Queen. Lyra received them all, from the highest-ranking Beta to the lowliest Omega. She listened to their stories, felt their pain as if it were her own, and when she could, she healed them. It was exhausting work, draining her physically and emotionally, but it was also deeply fulfilling, a purpose she had never dreamed possible during her years of exile and shame. One evening, a week after the breaking of the curse, Dominic found her slumped in a chair after a long day of healing, and her face pale with fatigue. "You push yourself too hard," he said, kneeling before her and taking her hands in his. "Your heart is boundless, but your body has limits." Lyra smiled tiredly. "There are so many in need. How can I turn them away?" "You cannot help everyone if you break yourself in the attempt," he countered. "Even the mightiest river must have banks to guide its flow." She recognized the phrase, another of Elias's sayings. The old Beta's wisdom lived on in the words Dominic had absorbed over years of counsel. It made her miss the old man fiercely. "I wish he were here," she said softly. "There is so much I still need to learn about what I am, what I can do." Dominic's expression gentled. "Perhaps he left us more than we realize." The next day he led her to a part of the fortress she had never seen before, a circular tower on the eastern edge, its windows catching the morning light. Inside was a library unlike any Lyra had ever imagined. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, packed with books, scrolls, and manuscripts. Tables covered in maps and charts filled the center of the room. And everywhere, on every available surface, were Elias's notes, his cramped, precise handwriting, documenting decades of observations and theories. His life's work, Dominic explained, the accumulated knowledge of 9 decades of study. Marcus tried to burn it all when he took power, but Elias had hidden duplicates of his most important works. The old fox was always 3 steps ahead. Lyra moved through the room in wonder, trailing her fingers over leather-bound spines and yellowed parchments. "There must be hundreds of volumes here." "Thousands," Dominic corrected. Elias believed that knowledge was the greatest treasure, more valuable than gold or territory. He spent his life collecting it, preserving it, adding to it. At the center of the room stood a simple wooden desk. Upon it lay a single book, newer than the others, bound in soft brown leather. A note rested on its cover, sealed with wax, impressed with Elias's personal sigil, a tree with deep roots. Lyra broke the seal with trembling fingers and read the message written in the old Beta's familiar hand. "For Lyra, the last Heartwood, if you are reading this, then events have unfolded as I foresaw. The king is free of his curse, and you have found your true nature. This journal contains everything I know about the Heartwood spirits, their history, their abilities, their purpose in the balance of things. It is incomplete, for there is much about your kind that has been lost to time. But it is a beginning. The path before you is not an easy one. The Heartwood was nearly wiped out centuries ago because its power threatened those who ruled through fear and domination. You will face opposition, doubt, perhaps even danger. But you have something your predecessors lacked, a king who sees your worth, who values wisdom as well as strength. My life has been long filled with both joy and sorrow. I have served 3 generations of Blackwood kings, watched empires rise and fall, seen the best and worst of what our kind can be. And in all those years, I never lost hope that the balance would one day be restored. You are that restoration, Lyra. You are the bridge between the old world and the new. Guard this knowledge, add to it, pass it on when the time comes. For that is how we truly live forever, not through magic or curses, but through what we leave to those who come after us. My journey ends where yours begins. Make it count, young queen." With faith in what will be, Thaddeus Elias, tears streamed down Lyra's face as she finished reading. Dominic stood beside her, his hand a comforting weight on her shoulder. He knew, she whispered. He knew what would happen. Not knew, Dominic corrected gently. Hoped, believed, worked toward. That was Elias always planting seeds he might never see grow into trees. Lyra opened the journal with reverent hands. Page after page revealed the secrets of the Heartwood Spirits, their connection to the ancient magic of the earth, their role as balancers and healers, their ability to transform darkness into light. There were exercises to strengthen her abilities, warnings about potential dangers, and most precious of all, the stories of other Heartwoods throughout history. She was not alone. She was not the first. She was part of a lineage that stretched back to the earliest days of their kind. This is his legacy, Dominic said, not just to us, but to generations yet unborn. As weeks turned to months, the fortress and the territory surrounding it transformed. The oppressive atmosphere that had characterized Marcus's reign gave way to a new openness. Windows that had been shuttered for years were thrown wide. Gardens that had withered from neglect bloomed again. Music and laughter echoed in halls that had known only fearful silence. Dominic proved to be a different kind of king than he had been before the curse. His ordeal had changed him, tempering his warrior's spirit with compassion, his authority with understanding. He still commanded absolute respect, but it was given freely rather than coerced through fear. Together, he and Lyra began to implement changes that would have been unthinkable in the old order. The rigid hierarchy that had defined their society for centuries began to loosen. Alphas, betas, and omegas found new ways to work together, each contributing their unique strengths to the whole. Most revolutionary of all was the Council of Elders that Dominic established in Elias's honor. Composed of the oldest members of each major pack regardless of rank, it served as an advisory body to the king, ensuring that the wisdom of age would never again be disregarded in favor of the ambitions of youth. My father believed that gray hair was a sign of weakness, Dominic explained at the council's first meeting. He surrounded himself with young warriors valuing strength above all else. It made him powerful but not wise. It made him feared but not loved. I will not repeat his mistakes. The elders, many of whom had been hidden away or ignored during Marcus's regime, straightened in their seats, pride replacing the resignation that had marked their features for too long. In honor of Thaddeus Elias, Dominic continued, this council will have my ear in all matters of importance. Your experiences, your memories, your hard-won wisdom, these are the foundations upon which we will rebuild Blackwood territory. An old alpha, his once powerful frame now bent with age, leaned forward. And what of those who say this is a step backward, that age weakens us, makes us hesitant when we should be bold? I would say they have never faced a true challenge, Dominic replied. Bold action without wisdom is just recklessness with a finer name. The council chamber located in what had once been Elias's tower became the heart of the new governance. Its walls were lined with maps and historical records. Its round table, crafted from a single ancient oak, symbolized the equality of voices. And at its center stood a small bronze statue of Elias, his wise eyes seemingly watching over their deliberations. For Lyra, the months following the breaking of the curse were a time of personal transformation as well. The wolfless Omega, who had been deemed worthless, now walked the halls of the fortress with quiet confidence. Her silver hair, once hidden beneath hoods and scarves for fear of drawing attention, now flowed freely down her back, adorned with the golden circlet of the Luna Queen. More significant than these outward changes, however, was the growth of her inner strength. As she studied Elias's journals and practiced the techniques he had documented, her Heartwood abilities flourished. The healing touch that had begun as instinct became a disciplined skill. The empathic sense that had once overwhelmed her now served as a finely tuned instrument, allowing her to sense imbalances and distress in those around her. Most rewarding of all was her work with the other Omegas. Inspired by her own journey, Lyra established a sanctuary within the fortress walls, a place where those who had been cast out or marginalized could find safety and purpose. She called it Elias's Haven, and its doors were open to any who sought refuge. You cannot save everyone, Dominic had cautioned when she first proposed the idea. No, she had agreed, but I can create a place where they might save themselves. The Haven quickly filled with those society had deemed useless Omegas without packs, shifters whose wolves were considered too weak, even a few rare individuals like Lyra herself who had been born without wolves, but possessed other gifts. Under her guidance, they discovered their own strengths, their own paths to belonging. One particular success brought Lyra a special joy. A young Omega girl named Sophia had been brought to the Haven, after being rejected by 3 different packs. She was deemed too small, too sickly, her wolf too meek to be of any value. Under Lyra's care, the girl's health improved, but more importantly, her spirit flourished. It turned out that Sophia had a remarkable ability with plants and intuitive understanding of their properties and needs that surpassed even the most experienced healers. I always knew which herbs would help my little brother when he was sick, Sophia explained shyly as she showed Lyra the medicinal garden she had created. But no one would listen to an Omega, especially not one whose wolf is so small. Size is not the measure of worth, Lyra replied, thinking of Elias's frail body and mighty mind. Some of the most powerful forces in nature are invisible to the eye. As summer gave way to fall and the forests of Blackwood territory blazed with color, preparations began for the autumn equinox festival, traditionally a time of thanksgiving and remembrance. This year's celebration would be especially significant, marking the first major public ceremony since the breaking of the curse. It would also be the official presentation of Lyra as Luna Queen. Though the mating bond was a private matter, in many ways pack tradition demanded a public acknowledgement, a formal acceptance by the people. Given her unusual status, a former outcast, a Heartwood Spirit, an Omega ruling beside an Alpha, there was considerable apprehension about how she would be received. "Are you nervous?" Dominic asked on the morning of the festival, finding her standing before the mirror in their chambers. She wore a gown of deep green silk embroidered with silver thread in patterns that echoed the Heartwood symbol from Elias's journal, a tree with roots as extensive as its branches. "A little," she admitted, her fingers smoothing the fabric. "I have never stood before so many. What if they reject me? What if they see only the wolfless Omega, not the queen?" Dominic moved behind her, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. In the mirror, they made a striking pair, the warrior king in his formal black attire and the silver-haired queen in forest green. "They will see what I see," he said with quiet confidence. "A woman of strength and wisdom, a healer, a bridge builder. And if some are too blind to recognize your worth well, then they are the ones lacking, not you." The festival grounds had been prepared in the valley below the fortress, a natural amphitheater surrounded by ancient pines. Banners bearing the Blackwood wolf snapped in the brisk autumn breeze. Tables groaned beneath the weight of the harvest bounty. Musicians tuned their instruments while children darted excitedly between the adults, their faces sticky with honeyed treats. As Dominic and Lyra approached, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. Thousands of eyes turned toward them, curious, evaluating, some hopeful, others skeptical. The moment stretched, tension building, like the silence before a storm. Then from the edge of the crowd, a figure stepped forward. It was Sophia, the young Omega from the Haven. In her hands, she carried a crown woven of autumn leaves and mountain flowers. With uncharacteristic boldness, she approached Lyra and held it up. "For our Heartwood Queen," she said, her voice small but clear in the silence. "May your roots grow as deep as your branches reach high." Lyra knelt, allowing the girl to place the crown upon her silver hair. As she rose, another figure emerged from the crowd, an old Alpha, his beard white with age, his back bent, but his eyes still fierce. He was one of the Council of Elders, a man who had initially been skeptical of Lyra's position. "The old ways are changing," he announced, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "Some say this is weakness. I say it is evolution. I have lived long enough to see the cost of rigidity, of valuing only one kind of strength." He turned to face Lyra directly. "My queen, you have shown us that true power lies not in domination, but in connection. Not in force, but in understanding. This old wolf bends his knee to your wisdom." To the astonishment of many, he lowered himself to one knee before her, a gesture of respect traditionally reserved for the Alpha King alone. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, like a wave, others began to kneel first, the elders, then the healers and teachers, then warriors and hunters, and finally even the most traditional Alphas. Lyra stood overwhelmed by the sea of faces turned toward her in acceptance. This was more than protocol or political expedience. This was genuine recognition, hard-won respect. Her heart swelled with gratitude for Elias, whose sacrifice had made this moment possible, and for Dominic, whose faith had never wavered. The king stepped forward, taking her hand in his. "People of Blackwood," he called out, his voice strong and clear. "Before you stands Lyra of Silver Creek, my mate, my queen and your savior. It was her strength that broke the curse. Her courage that exposed the traitor in our midst. Her power, a power not of claw and fang, but of heart and soul that has healed your king and begun to heal our land. A murmur of wonder rippled through the assembled shifters. Some had heard the story of the curse breaking, but most knew only fragments, rumors distorted by distance and retelling. Our laws, our traditions have taught us to value only one kind of strength. Dominic continued, his voice resonating with passion. We have discarded those we deemed weak. We have shamed those who are different. We have allowed fear and prejudice to rule us, no more. He raised their joined hands high. Today marks a new era. Compassion is not weakness. Empathy is a weapon. And love, his eyes found Lyra's, and the entire festival seemed to fade away for him, is the most powerful magic of all. The crowd erupted in cheers. Music swelled, drowning out the last whispers of doubt. The festival began in earnest, a true celebration, not just of harvest bounty, but of renewal, of transformation, of hope, rekindled after years of darkness. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire, Dominic and Lyra slipped away from the revelry, seeking a moment of quiet togetherness. They climbed to a small ridge overlooking the valley, where the music and laughter of the festival rose like smoke from a welcoming hearth. They have accepted you, Dominic said, drawing her close against the evening chill. Just as I knew they would. They have accepted change, Lyra corrected gently. That is a far more difficult thing. They stood in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the deepening blue of the sky. The harvest moon, so recently the harbinger of danger, now hung serene and golden above the eastern peaks. What do you think Elias would say if he could see us now? Lyra asked, leaning her head against Dominic's shoulder. The king smiled, a rare expression that transformed his severe features. He would say something cryptic and wise that we wouldn't fully understand until years later. That was his way. I miss him, she admitted. I feel as though I had only just begun to know him when he was taken from us. His body is gone, Dominic said, but his wisdom remains. In his journals, in his tower, in the council that bears his name, in the changes we make because of what he taught us. He placed a gentle hand on Lyra's abdomen, a protective gesture, and soon in what we pass on to the next generation. Lyra's eyes widened. How did you know? I only confirmed it myself this morning. The bond between us grows stronger each day. He replied, his voice rough with emotion. I felt the change in you, a new brightness, a new life-taking root. The news of her pregnancy was still new, fragile as a seedling. The healer had confirmed what her own senses had begun to tell her, that a child grew within her, a perfect union of Alpha King and Heartwood Queen. What such a child might become, what gifts it might possess, were questions for the future. For now it was enough to know that life continued, that hope took new forms. A child, Dominic murmured, wonder in his voice. Our child. The first of a new generation, Lyra said. Born without the shadow of the curse, without the constraints of the old ways. Dominic's arms tightened around her. What shall we teach this child of ours? What world shall we build for them? Lyra considered the question, her hand coming to rest over his on her still flat stomach. We will teach them what Elias taught us. That true strength lies in wisdom, not force. That diversity is not weakness, but resilience. That the oldest trees in the forest are not the ones with the thickest bark, but the ones with the deepest roots. Below them, the festival continued, bonfires blazing against the gathering darkness. Voices raised in song echoed off the mountainsides. It was a moment of perfect balance, of endings and beginnings, of remembrance and anticipation, of individual joy and collective celebration. He will know the value of both worlds, Dominic said, already certain the child was a son, the strength of the Alpha, the wisdom of the Heartwood. And he will know his own worth, Lyra added, not measured against others, but discovered within himself. As the moon climbed higher, bathing the valley in its gentle light, the king and queen of Blackwood territory stood together, united by love, by struggle, by shared purpose. Behind them lay a past of pain and isolation. Before them stretched a future bright with possibility. The wolfless Omega had become a queen. The cursed king had become whole. And together they had begun to heal not just themselves, but an entire people, an entire way of life. In the library tower, where Elias's wisdom was preserved in thousands of carefully penned pages, a soft breeze stirred the air, turning the leaves of an open journal. On the exposed page, written in the old beta's precise hand, were words he had recorded decades before a prophecy, or perhaps just a hope. When shadow and light find balance true, when the broken king and the hidden queen join as one beneath harvest moon, then shall begin the age of healing, then shall end the time of fear. The heartwood rises, the cycle turns, and wisdom takes its rightful place beside strength upon the throne. The breeze faded, the pages stilled, but the words remained a testament to a life lived in service, to a future its author would never see. The legacy of Thaddeus Elias lived on in the king he had guided, in the queen he had recognized, in the child yet unborn, and in the society being reborn around them. The reign of the Shadow Blight was over. The time of the Heartwood had begun.